I am excited to share with you from 1958 a scholar that published an article called A Critique of C.S. Lewis. Among his criticisms in this article was the accusation that Lewis did not care much for the Sermon on the Mount. Now, I want to invite you to hear Lewis's response. As to caring for the Sermon on the Mount, if caring for here means liking or enjoying, I suppose no one cares for it. Who can be like being knocked flat on his face by a sledgehammer? I can hardly imagine a more deadly spiritual condition than that of a man who can read that passage with tranquil pleasure. Well said, Lewis. Well said. The Sermon on the Mount was Jesus teaching to his disciples, helping them understand what the kingdom of God was all about. And it challenged their perceptions and their confronting their thoughts about what God cared about and what really mattered. It was not a comfortable message, but it was comforting. The poor, the meek, the grieving. It's not like what you thought. They are blessed and seen and known by God. See, Jesus upends and writes their priorities with this message. And so that's why our pastoral team is focusing on this message throughout this summer, the narrow way. Jesus is inviting us to have our perspective shifted too. Now imagine, Jesus is sitting on the hillside, one of the most beautiful sights, the Sea of Galilee. I love it. It was one of my favorite spots to just look out, and the water is cool and fresh and blue, and he's sitting out among the grasses and the flowers. And in those days, when you were teaching, you sat down and the people stood up. The disciples and the would-be disciples were gathered around close, seeking to hear his every word. Look how much has changed. Now teachers have to stand and you get to sit. But what hasn't changed is their reaction. Their response was being challenged. That he, as we do too, listen to this message and are confronted with, well, how is it that my heart and life are not in alignment with that way, with that understanding of how the world works and what this all looks like? Jesus was confronting their misunderstandings, and we find out that he wants the truth to sink deep into our hearts. So Jesus goes into 4 statements that sound like Jesus is changing everything. You have heard it said, but I say to you. You have heard it said this, but I say to you. Now, in order to really understand that, we have to remember what Jesus said in verse 17 of Matthew chapter 5. Do not think I've come to abolish the law and the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. So there was a way that they understood it, but there was a deeper meaning, a deeper truth that Jesus was coming to reveal. All of these quotes were from the Old Testament. They were the law, and Jesus was at the same time confronting how people applied that, what they thought it looked like to live it out. Jesus was giving them a new perspective on what it looked like in their actual lives. So you've heard it said that this is the way it looks. But here's another way to live that law of God in your life. And so Jesus cares both about what's happening on the inside of my life as well as the outside of my life. It's both. Jesus cares about what's going on within you and your experience of your life as well as your expression of your life. And God longs for this to come into alignment with the way of God so that there's congruence between your interior life and your exterior life, that you live in alignment, that I live in alignment with the values of God, the truth of God. So last week, Pastor Mike took us through anger, lust, and divorce, and today we're looking at swearing of oaths to bolster our promises and revenge towards those who have wronged us. Or in fewer words, we're talking about telling the truth and getting even. So first, oaths. Let's read in the verse 33, it says, again you have heard that it was said to people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill it to the Lord, the vows that you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot even make one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. There are two issues here in this section that I want to focus on. Do not swear an oath at all. This is really strong language that Jesus speaks. And the people in Jesus' time would make a promise and then look to something to substantiate that promise. I swear by heaven that I'll do this. But then when confronted that they didn't follow through and do that, they would say, I swore by heaven, but did I swear by the God in heaven? No, I didn't. And so it was used as a way to break their promise, to get out of the commitment that they had made. So what is the deeper value? What is it that God cares about? God is a God of truth. God cares about truth. So God says, when you make an oath and try to find a way to get out of it, it doesn't honor a God of truth. Jesus is saying what many of you heard growing up, which is a little easier to say than to live. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Okay, let's try that again. Say what you mean. Oh yeah, it's first service, and you woke up and there you got it. So good job. I appreciate it. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Let your word be good for something, Jesus is saying. Don't try to get out of it. Most of us have heard stories of people like this. Grandpa who owned a business and never made a contract in his whole life. If he showed up and said he'd do the job, his word was as good as finished, right? Or that person that they had a handshake and they knew that she would follow through if she had shaken hands on it. There are cultures in the world that still operate this very way. Jesus is saying, be a person where your yes and your no mean something. Be a person that lives a life of integrity. Don't try to look for technicalities or be concerned about the appearance of loving God and less with the reality of loving God. The key to making of oaths was appearing like, oh, I swear by heaven that I will do this. You had the appearance, but no substance. So lacking follow through, Jesus says God cares about the congruence in our lives. The second issue here is that of humility. So first truth, then humility. The way of Jesus is a way of humility, and that's hard. Let me tell you, this is the one that I struggle with. I wonder if you might too. Jesus is saying, not only be a person who cares about truth, but be a person that recognizes that you are not in control. You can't even turn a single hair on your head from black to white. You don't control anything. Even with your most stressful job or your most demanding day parenting, it takes a while to turn those hairs to gray. You can't do it in a moment. You can't even do such a small thing. How can you say that something for sure will happen? Making an oath about tomorrow or promising that something will come to be? It's hard to live in this way, but the narrow way of Jesus says that I live in a way that recognizes my powerlessness. Because we live into the reality, or we believe that we have say over what happens. Most of the pain, stress, or challenge in our lives is when we have expectations that we know how things will go, or we live under the delusion that we have control. Think about it. Think about your most stressful times in your life. It's because you thought that by this time, this would have happened. Or surely that child would be this way. Or there's no way that could ever be me. And you found yourself exactly where you thought you wouldn't. Right? And Jesus, I think with a little smile, you can't even turn one hair on your head to white. You're not in control. This week, a friend I went to high school with, who's my age, he died suddenly. And I'm grieving with his dear family, and I invite you to pray with me for the Matson family, for Craig. Many of you know what this is like, that you're going along one day and then suddenly it all changes. That's right where they find themselves right now. Jesus is saying, live with an awareness. Live with an awareness of how little you control in your life. We don't control what happens to us or in the lives of those that we love. If you promise something will happen, saying, surely this will be, it can only come from the evil one, because you and I are not in control. How foolish it is that we think we have control over tomorrow. Jesus says, my way is a way of humility. My way is a way of truth. Jesus cares not just what I say, but what I do and who I am. So there's this congruence between what I say and who I am and what I do, and all of that is what he's talking about in this way, this narrow way. That what lines up on the inside is what's happening on the outside. If you're hearing this and you feel challenged by it, good. I am too. The message isn't an easy one. It was meant to show us that we need the power and strength of God in our lives. And as one commentator said, if you're not challenged, then you just didn't understand. Second is revenge. Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. You have heard the law that says the punishment must match the injury, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. If you are sued in court, your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. If a soldier demands you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. Give to those who ask, and don't turn away from those who want to borrow. Now, he said, you've heard it said, so where does this come from? It's from 3 places, Exodus 21, Leviticus 24, Deuteronomy 19. These are the places where they heard it was said. And the prevailing question here is, what do I do when someone harms me? What do I do when someone is causing harm in my life? So Exodus 21, 23, it says, look at this. If there is further injury, the punishment must match the injury. Life for life, we heard that. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. We're just going to go all out into every single way that you could be harmed. But then Jesus comes along, and he seems to be showing them a different way. First of all, first observation is this isn't really news, right? This law. If they hurt you, you hurt them. This is a very human way to live. But what you're missing here, besides the story that humans have been telling for generations of harm and harm causing to people, is that people in Jesus' day weren't hearing and thinking about the limits that this set in Moses' time. God gave Moses these laws to set limits on their justice. The human desire is that when you hit me, I hit you, and then I step on your foot. We take it a step further. And so these were meant to be limits to what justice looks like. These were not meant to be instructions about personal or neighborly relationships. Here's what you do if you want to be in relationship with people. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, bruise for bruise. It's not instructions, it's limits. And so saying, don't go beyond this. So it's not meant to be viewed as an obligation. If you hurt me, then I have to hurt you back. God is saying punishment cannot be excessive of the crime. If someone does this, don't do more than this. That doesn't mean that Christians should never seek punishment for wrongdoers. But if someone hurts your hand, don't go murder them tomorrow. That's what this is meant to say. There are limits to justice. This is a good law. But Jesus isn't bringing up the life and limb. He's bringing up insult. He's bringing up when our pride is hurt. These are not blows that threaten our lives, but someone who is seeking to humiliate you. Pastor Mike, could I have your help for just a second? Just come right on up here. Thank you so much. He is going to stand right here to just demonstrate, because if he were trying to punch me in the face, which he's not going to do, that's why I trust him so much. Yes, you do. But notice, the only way to hit him on the right cheek is to hit him how? With the back of the hand, right? So this isn't about harm, this is about humiliation. Because if I'm punching him or if he's punching me, that's for harm. But Jesus is saying that if someone insults you, because this in this culture was completely a way to shame or humiliate someone. Not a hit to harm, but to humiliate. And Jesus is saying when they try to humiliate you, to put you lower, to say you're beneath me, back of the hand, not even worthy, turn them the other cheek as well. So this is not saying if someone is beating you that you never have a right to defend yourself, but when someone is seeking to humiliate you, that you, knowing your identity, clear on who you are not to be humiliated. Thank you so much. Sometimes you just have to see it, right? So you do not resist those who are seeking to devalue you. This is what Jesus' life shows us lived out. This people that were spitting at him, hurling insults at him, saying things that were not true. Jesus trusted God in the midst of all of it and showed us what it looks like. There are ways we could misunderstand this. Like I said, people have used this to say never defend against a physical attack. But Jesus was talking about insults and wounds to our reputation and to our pride. He's saying this is the best way for evil to be resisted. See, the thing is, the way the world experiences salt, the way the world sees light, is how we don't act or respond in the way that they expect. Responding in love, revealing injustice is the most effective way to resist evil. As someone at work tries to devalue you and speak poorly about you, and you instead show up and treat them in love, you're salty to them. You're shining with light. I don't understand. How are they doing this? If they slap you, if they try to humiliate or damage your reputation, and you are empowered, knowing who you are, turning the other cheek, standing in the dignity and trust in God, it's going to stand out because that's not a normal human response. Where did that come from? See, they wore layers in Jesus' day, the inner garment and then the coat on the outside. It's not like today where you have multiple coats, or you would if you weren't a Californian, own multiple coats. They had one. And so the law said that you couldn't take someone's coat because it was their survival. They needed to be able to wrap it around them and to keep warm. And so Jesus says that the law sets limits so that you are left with your coat. But he's saying going beyond that by giving them your coat also. Someone is taking you to court, suing you for the clothes on your back, and you, by taking off your coat, are basically saying, I'm going home in my underwear. Now that's revealing of injustice, right? You want to have everything? Take it all. So there's this going beyond that is two principles at work here. The law of love says do more than the law requires. Show more love. Show more humility in our lives. You will confuse your enemies because evil and darkness don't know what to do with love and kindness. This is how they will see that you are salt and light. They expect you to try to get them back for what you're doing, but instead you keep showing up in love, and it makes them look at everything differently. And the second principle, though, is that going above and beyond reveals injustice. When you turn the other cheek, you reclaim your autonomy and your power. When you're suing someone and they are left with nothing, it reveals that injustice. When the Romans demand that you are walking a mile, carrying their burden, when you say, no, I'll go the extra mile, you're making them break the law because they were only allowed to have you go 1 mile. They wanted you to know you were an occupied people. So you're revealing the injustice of the situation by being willing to go more. So Jesus radically transforms the way we interact with the world, including the evil we experience. So the question here is, how do I respond when I'm devalued, when there's injustice, when I'm humiliated or wronged or insulted? How do you respond? Jesus changes the way that we experience this pain. And on the narrow way, gives us a way to show up salty and full of light by showing up in love and revealing the injustice of the situation. It's both at work here. One of my kids came home telling me the story Pastor Sabina started with the kids of Sadako Sasaki. Here she is, Sadako Sasaki. She was 2 years old, as you heard, when the United States dropped the atomic bomb in Hiroshima. They were hoping to end the war. She didn't seem to have any injuries at that time of the bombing and went on to be a part of her school relay team. She was fast, and she made many friends. But when she was 9 years old, she was diagnosed with leukemia from the radioactive fallout and given less than 1 year to live. When she was in the hospital, she was sent origami cranes. And her dad shared with her the legend that if she folded 1,000 cranes, her wish would be granted. Sasaki committed to folding 1,000 cranes before her death. Although she had plenty of free time in the hospital, Sasaki lacked paper, so she ended up using medicine wrappers, and she would scrounge around to find every piece that she could. Some of her cranes were no bigger than a grain of rice. She made them by hand in the hospital. She would go to the doors of her fellow patients and ask for the wrappers from their get well presents so that she could fold more. She miraculously lived until she was 12 years old. We have a representation of her here today, Sasaki with us in life here. A popular version of this story said that she fell short of making her 1,000 cranes and that her friends completed them and buried them with her. However, her brother tells the complete story of Sadako Sasaki, and the truth is she exceeded her goal by 300. She folded 1,300 cranes. When she died on October 22, 1955, her parents were so poor that they couldn't afford a stone to memorialize her. No tombstone. So Sasaki's friends worked hard for years and raised money. They went everywhere they could to raise money for a statue to commemorate her. For years, finally a statue was made, and it's in the Children's Peace Monument, her with her crane above her head. Sasaki became a leading symbol of the effects of nuclear war and has become an international symbol of peace and a peaceful world. Especially right now, people are clinging to this image in the ongoing invasion of Russia and Ukraine. The legend was, remember, that if you folded 1,000 cranes, that her wish would be granted. And her wish was to be well again and for peace to come to the world. In the 2000s, her brother donated 5 of her original cranes to all 5 continents, to 5 different continents, including in New York City, into the National Monument for September 11. He donated one to the Museum of Tolerance and at Pearl Harbor. Each of these different places were commemorating the peace that she sought to have in the world. And each year, right there at the Children's Peace Monument, people send in strings of cranes, and they place them everywhere, giving a symbol of what we all long for, peace in the world. And white doves are released, which to us, the symbol of the Spirit, but each year when those are released, they remember peace in the world. I believe as disciples, walking the narrow way of Jesus is like folding these cranes. We live in ways that don't make sense. We live according to the narrow way of Jesus, which says, I'm not seeking your harm. In humility, I recognize that I am not in control. My yes is my yes and my no is my no. We don't respond to insults by seeking the harm of others, but instead we reveal injustice and live ways of peace. And with each and every fold, we say, this is not the way things were meant to be. The way things are now is not the way things will always be. We do not control what happens in our world, but we choose a way of love. And with every fold, we live into the narrow way of Jesus. With every act in our lives. One of the questions that Sadaki asked her family was, am I even going to be remembered? As a 9, 10, 11-year-old girl, she said, Am I going to even be remembered in this world? I just smile to think of all of the monuments and all of the ways that the ripples from her life have continued. Because when you live in the narrow way of Jesus, the acts feel small, but they are significant. As you don't act in response to what someone did to you, they see the love of God. She folded cranes. Did it change the fact that the bomb dropped? No. Did it change the fact that she was dying and died? No. Did it change the fact that her family still missed her the rest of their life? No. Did she show clearly another way to live? Yes. She showed a way of hope. And this is the way I believe Jesus is showing us in this message, a way of integration and congruence, of peace and of love. I want to walk on this narrow way with each fold of my life, a part of the peace God is wishing to bring. How about you?
I'm Pastor Tara VinCross, and we're so glad that you're here as a part of this Azure Hills Church community. Please like and subscribe, and click the bell to be notified for when we share new videos. Would you also pray over giving to support this ministry? AzureHills.org/give is the place to go. We pray for you regularly, that God would continue to move and work in your life.